All right, so the lecture for today is on sex, love, and attachment, and that is because even though we're going to be talking a lot about sex, and we have talked a lot about sex in this course, usually for people, or very often, it occurs in the context of a relationship. Maybe it's with somebody you don't know very well, or maybe it's somebody you know very well and you love them very much. But usually it occurs in the context of a relationship. And so we often cover that in this class as well. I used to cover different kinds of love and different theories of love, but I quit doing that because I just didn't find any of them to be very compelling. And also, I mean, they don't have very much research that backs them. Your book does go into some of them, but for the most part today, I'm not going to. I am going to talk about, however, romantic love. We'll start with that. Let's see if I can get to the right slide here. I'm going to skip this slide. Okay, here we go. And just as a reminder, after today, you're responsible for attachment theory, understanding the phenomenon of romantic love in Western culture as a Western concept, and aspects of sexuality that correlate with attachment styles. That's from the discussion posts. Okay, so romantic love. Now, love, not romantic love, but just love in general, having strong positive feelings towards someone, is something that's been written about since the dawn of humans, or since humans have been writing. And romantic love also has been written about since the Greek and Roman times. And mostly in Western culture, when people write about romantic love, it includes some idealization of the other person. In object relations terms, this is utilizing a splitting defense. I know this is a little bit much for this class, but it's you know how it is when you fall in love. A lot of times you take all the negative characteristics that the person has, and you almost deny them or repress them in the beginning. That falling in love is about idealization and not focusing on the negatives of the person. And that's true throughout history and throughout and across different Western cultures. And examples of romantic love in writing have even been found in cultures where romantic love is officially prohibited. So the heteronormative script in Western society is that you fall in love and you get married. Maybe more recently, you fall in love and you partner. Maybe you don't use the word marriage, but I want you to be aware of the fact that romantic love hasn't always been paired with marriage. If you can remember from the history chapters, from the history chapter in the lecture, that marriage for most of humanity has been about combining resources, combining land, combining armies, and and most marriages were arranged. This started changing in the medieval or in the Middle Ages, and in the 1700s, you started to see some mention in various writings about wouldn't it be nice if you liked your spouse? And certain people started, you'd start to see mentions of this in literature where somebody would marry for love. It was very uncommon, but you started to see it in the 1700s. And even as recently as the 1960s, less than half of women indicated that love alone was a good reason to marry. So you can see this has changed a lot over the past couple hundred years. Now, one thing I usually lecture on is the difference between romantic love and friendship in Western culture. I know this isn't uh, completely cut and dry, but I do want to mention that for most Western cultures, there is a difference between romantic love and friendship, and that can be seen in these four variables here. The first one is fascination, and fascination simply means you think about someone a lot. They're on your mind. So for those of you who are in Denmark and you're in love with somebody back home, you think about that person a lot. You might, when you go to a cafe, you might think, oh, so and so would love this cafe. Or when you hear a song, playing on your headset, you think, oh, wouldn't Johnny like this song? It's his favorite song. And they're just in your consciousness a lot. We call that fascination. Number two is usually exclusivity, usually with romantic love. Now, there are some people that have challenged this, and some of them we'll learn about this semester. But most of the time, people fall in love with one person at a time, and it's exclusivity. You can have a lot of friends, but most people, and I hear a lot of people saying, I can't fall in love with more than one person at a time. So exclusivity is also a factor. Number three is sexual desire. In Western culture, we typically pair sexual desire and romantic love, and we don't usually have sex with our friends. Again, I understand that sometimes there are friends with benefits in college culture today, but for the most part, we usually fall in love with somebody and have sex with them and reserve our sex for our love relationships, but not for our friendships. And number four is commitment to give a great deal to one another. The person that you have romantic love for is the person that you intertwine your life with. When you are in the hospital and you have surgery or you've had a car accident or something happened, there's somebody who goes to your house, packs a suitcase for you and brings everything. There's somebody who talks to the doctors about how the surgery went or what's required now, and it's usually your romantic partner. Who do you share a bank account with? It's usually not a friend. It's usually a romantic partner. Who do you have kids with? Usually a romantic partner, not a friend. So all these ways of intertwining one's life are usually paired with our romantic partner. In terms of love, there are psychological theories of love. And by the way, even the Greeks wrote about a whole bunch of different kinds of love, Eros, and some other names that they gave to them. And so there have been psychologists who've tried to differentiate between different types of love. In general, Freud and some of his followers have written about love, falling in love more as a kind of pathology. Something's wrong. Um, Freud and some of his followers, they talked about this concept called ego ideal, and they speculated that we fall in love with someone who possesses the traits we most want. Somebody we sort of covet. We covet what they have or who they are. Maslow talked about love and said that we must be self-actualized in order to love. This is where we get the old pop psychology. You have to love yourself before you can love other people. Object relations theorists talked about falling in love in terms of a splitting defense, where we put in our unconscious all of the bad parts of a person. So, as a reminder, we have Freud here, and from after Freud came some of the Neo-Freudians or object relations theory, and after object relations theory came attachment theory, which is what we're talking about today. If you're interested, after attachment theory came mentalization theory, and that is the latest iteration of Freudian theory. So what about attachment? Now, attachment theory is super cool, and it explains a lot of stuff with kids and with adults. And basically, now this is a picture of the famous monkey experiment with Harry Harlow. And, after object relations theory, and this is, keep in mind, this is just post World War II, so the mid 40s, 50s, and this recognition that there's a recognition that what happens in early childhood is supremely important. And there was a whole bunch of monkey studies done at this time. There's studies that they can't and wouldn't do now because of animal rights activists. I mean, there's a lot of baby monkeys who were raised without their mothers and other kinds of conditions. We learned a lot from them, but we traumatized a lot of monkeys too. And, just all sorts of wild stuff. Like if you take a baby monkey's mother away, a couple of different things happen. One is some monkeys will self-harm. They'll actually scratch themselves and scratch their arms. So there's data about that. Also, if you take their mother away, they won't know how to parent their own children. They'll neglect them. Another thing we found is that if you autopsy the monkeys who've had the mother taken away early on, when you autopsy them later, the part of the brain that produces endorphins, that's called the substantia nigra, has atrophied. So there's something about this endorphin slash attachment slash neglect relationship that seems quite important. At any rate, this is about the basis for attachment theory, and there's been research on attachment theory with humans too, but some of this groundbreaking work was with monkeys and what happens when you take their mothers away. Just to give you a sense again of how attachment theory fits into overall dynamic theory, this is a little bit academic, you don't have to memorize this, but early dynamic theories, they were drive theories. And what that said is that humans have some sort of underlying drive toward a goal that motivates us, that makes us do things. And famously, Freud said it was sex, though that gets a little bit distorted. And what he really meant was this sort of drive for procreation. And for those of you who've been to Vienna with your European clinical psych class, Adler talked about the drive to power, and Frankl talked about the drive to meaning. Later on, the object relations theorists talked about separate drives, one for connectedness, for being close to people, and another for being on your own, separateness. Attachment theory rewrote the drive theory to be something like drive is to attain and maintain proximity to a caring adult. Now, human babies, unlike some other species, are completely helpless. And so in order to survive, you have to be cute enough to have a grown-up person take care of you, or you'd have to be lucky enough to have a grown-up person take care of you. And that was what ensured some survival. So attachment is about maintaining proximity to caring others. And I like to think about it with this X and Y axis. The reason why I think this is important is because different attachment theorists have named the 4 attachment styles slightly different names. And some of them only have 3. So we're all on the same page. I want to talk about 4, and I want to talk about them in the terms of this. You can see the X-axis here is anxiety, and the Y-axis is avoidance.